Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Daily Fantasy Pivot on rotocurve.com. We, of course, are a show aimed to teach the masses. Now we're in baseball season, so how to play the game of daily fantasy baseball. We're going to go through the slate, go through the games, and now this is baseball, so we're going to go through the weather, too, which you didn't have to deal with in basketball. But that brings an interesting aspect to both the game and certainly the slate tonight. But don't forget to check out. Do we have a free roll this week, Josh? Where, and what sport?
The free roll this week was actually on Monday. I know we are working on getting another one up, so once we have that up, I'll get you the details as soon as possible.
There you go. No free roll. I'm talking out my ass again there. But
Actually, don't we have one for Friday? Isn't there a $250 one for Friday?
If there is, I just saw it. So all right, well let's check that real quick. If it is up there, then go ahead, join it.
Well, regardless of whether or not there's a free roll, you can find the tools on rotocurve.com. MLB tools, we got PGA tools. I know we got the Masters coming up, and we still got NBA tools. I still cranked out an NBA article this week, so if you have any interest at all in rotations, I got an article for you this week. But let's focus on baseball now, and let's bring in the guys who will be tagging along with me on this very interesting rain-filled slate. First, let's bring in the man with the DraftKings background, who looks like, I'm trying to think what you look like. Maybe Ethan Hawke from the movie Training Day. Didn't he wear one of those hats? Anyways, Benny, what's going on?
Not much. I see everybody's got jokes tonight. Should be fun.
Always, man, always. The man who's dressed like he's from the movie Sandlot with the backwards hat tonight, Josh Collacchi. Josh, you got one player tonight for us that you think is going to explode, that the masses aren't really on to start the show?
I think it's Kenta Maeda, but after these entire slate has gone on today and all the people looking on Twitter and comments and in the chat, I don't feel like he's a guy that nobody's on. It looks like everybody's going to be on that guy.
Yeah, I certainly am on that guy. I don't need kind of like Trevor's story. I don't need a sample size to be sold on a guy, especially if he's in a good situation. And now let's bring in Nick Mensio. Nick, I met your cousin the other day. Your whole family is 6'7". It's not just you. So I got to ask you, how's the weather up there?
It's going to be rainy tonight.
Yes, it will. He's a Cardinals fan, so the Cardinals, let's start with them tonight. There's going to be rain there, which really sucks because there were a lot of hitters that I really like, and I think I'm going to stick on maybe some of them, but it's certainly a risk. Nick, you know it better than anyone. What do you think that the odds of this game getting in are? And if it does, I mean, don't we have to be on Matt Carpenter, Colton Wong, those guys from the Cardinals?
Yeah, I think this game's going to get in. I mean, I think further, I don't know if is Cleveland and Cincinnati further east or west. I'm not even sure. I don't know. I obviously haven't looked at a map since like grade school, but I think this game's going to get in. It doesn't seem like the rain's going to affect this game too hard. I was reading Kevin Roth's stuff on Roto Grinders earlier this morning. He said this game should get in with the rain coming in right after game time. So I'm not too worried about this one, but I definitely like Matt Carpenter in the leadoff spot. I know that the Cardinals are 0-2 right now. Last season, when they've struggled, they've had really good bounce back games in final games of series if they've lost the first two. So I like this spot for them. I like Carpenter. I like Brandon Moss a lot, actually, in that cleanup spot for the Cardinals. I think he could dunk tonight. Former Pirate. His hard percentage last year against right-handers was number 2 in the league behind Chris Davis. So I think he's in a great spot tonight.
Yeah, and we just wanted to start with that. There's a couple other games that are going to be affected by weather. One of those is the game, unfortunately, that features Steven Strasburg, and we'll start with pitchers when we get there. But the other one is Reds and Phillies, and that one, to me, looks the worst in terms of weather. Benny, is that a game that the weather looks so bad that we kind of just have to fully avoid? Or is it just a game that you're going to avoid in cash and try and see if you can catch, maybe they go through a delay, but they get the game in? Which kind of situation is it for you?
Yeah, well, the good thing about that game is it is a 7 o'clock start, so we should have as much information as we're going to be able to have right before it, first pitch happens. So as of now, I'm kind of shying away from it, but there are a lot of guys that I have written up in this game as people that I wanted to take a look at. So I don't have many of them in my roster right now. I still have a couple rosters that I'll change when we get off the show that has some of them in it. So, this is actually a good point I wanted to bring up. For those of you out there who aren't, make sure you get onto Twitter and follow at WeatherDFS. Our girl Danielle tweets out, basically the weather reports for the entire, slate of games every night. So she actually just tweeted out that it looks like that Washington-Atlanta game is going to be safe. It doesn't seem like the rain's going to roll in until later on tonight. So that's definitely good because I know we were talking before the show, and there's quite a few guys, on that Washington team that we want to target tonight.
Yeah, and let's start going through the positions, and let's start with starting pitcher because I think we would all agree that's probably the most important position in all of daily fantasy baseball. You definitely want to get pitchers right, which doesn't necessarily mean you have to spend up for the most expensive guy. You just don't want to have a starting pitcher that gets shelled. And I'll go to you first, Josh, but I know for me, I'm 100% on Steven Strasburg tonight. I'm going to go ahead and call him a must-play, even with the weather issues. We've been discussing kind of off-air how I saw Strasburg this spring, and he kind of looked awesome to me. It's about the age where he needs to break out. He was an elite-level prospect. He's one of the top strikeout guys. We're talking almost 10.5 Ks. And Atlanta, you'll go over the numbers. Atlanta kind of stinks. But do you think Strasburg's a must-play through all three sites, let's say Fantasy Draft, DK, and FanDuel, or are you going in a different direction?
For this slate, Strasburg is a must-play for me, especially if you're playing cash games. I haven't looked at the updated odds yet, but this morning he was a minus 200 favorite. Is that updated? Does anybody have any updated numbers on that?
I do not. I will check into that 1 second. But yeah, I know he did open as the biggest favorite.
Yeah, it's still the same at minus 200, yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah, minus 200 favorite is an astronomical number. A fellow member of RotoCurve, Michael Rathburn, whatever, with me before the season, a whole bunch of data that he had backtracked. And guys that have a 200 favorite or more basically are a lock for close to over 19 FanDuel points last year, which, of course, now is over 57, which is an excellent score for a pitcher. Translating to DraftKings points, that's got to be something over 25 or more. Now, considering that was basically the floor of guys that had a minus 200 favorite last year, it gives you an excellent chance for a guy like Strasburg to succeed. Now, that's just the Vegas number. As Ricky said, this guy is an excellent pitcher. He's an excellent strikeout pitcher as well. And it's interesting because his matchup tonight against the Braves, last season, Atlanta did not strike out too much, so something's got to give, but I think that advantage definitely has to go to Strasburg, considering he has some of the nastiest stuff in baseball.
Well, also another thing that people don't take into consideration is if you're facing a team that doesn't strike out a lot, sure, maybe it tunes down a pitcher's K per 9 potential, but maybe that means he's getting more quick outs with them making weak contact in terms of Strasburg. So maybe his innings potential are even higher. Nick, I know that FanDuel puts a higher premium on wins. So with Strasburg as a minus 200 favorite, are you locking him in, or is there another guy you like better?
I'm really between him and Kenta Maeda for the Dodgers. I don't know anything about this Kenta Maeda guy. I don't think I've ever seen him even pitch in real on TV. But I know one thing, and that's that the Padres haven't scored a run yet this season. I don't believe, and they were 28th in WOBA against righties last season and 25th in strikeout percentage against righties. So this just sets up perfectly, especially with his price at 7,200 on FanDuel. You can just fit in so many good bats. So. I just think Maeda is definitely in play with Strasburg.
Yeah, and I'll give you the little statistics that I do know on Maeda, and that's that he was a pitching Triple Crown winner in Japan. That's pretty impressive. So obviously there was a reason they gave him a contract, threw him right into the rotation. And the thing with these new pitchers is the first time around the league, there usually is no tape on them, so teams have a rougher time. Whereas over time, once you've seen what the guy can do, then he starts getting hit. That's kind of a trend that I've noticed. Benny, which of the two do you like, or do you have different thoughts at the position?
Yeah, I actually like both of them. Give you some background on Maeda to build on what you were saying for everyone who's kind of wondering. He basically has an arsenal of 5 pitches. He throws a 4-seam fastball about 92 to 93 miles an hour, has a 2-seamer that he throws about 89, 90 miles an hour, and supposedly he has a really nasty slider that he throws in the high 80s, 87, 88 miles an hour that has a good break on it. And then he has the curveball that he uses and like a circle change that a lot of the Japanese pitchers kind of throw that he'll throw just to mix it up a little bit and keep hitters off balance. But for the most part, he's not unlike a lot of American pitchers in that he relies a lot on his fastball, relies a lot on that slider to, induce some bad ground balls. He had, I think it was 178 strikeouts in 214 innings in Japan, which actually makes him a guy who should be about 7.5 to 8.5 Ks per nine over here in the States. If you know anything about Japanese baseball, there's a lot more emphasis on putting the ball in play and forcing teams to kind of make plays as opposed to American baseball where chicks dig the long ball and we wind up striking out a little more. So guys that come over from playing in the Pacific leagues over there usually do raise their strikeout numbers a little bit, which would probably put him somewhere in the range of 7.5 Ks per nine innings. So I mean, this guy profiles out as an ace, and like Ricky said, he was somebody who won the pitching triple crown over in the Japanese league. So lowest ERA, most strikeouts, and most wins. Which I don't care what league you're playing in, if you can pull that off, you're probably a pretty good pitcher. So Dodgers paid a lot of money. They put up $20 million as a posting fee for the right to get this guy. And from all accounts, he's somebody that should be a solid pitcher in major leagues. And then you add to the fact that they're playing the Padres, who are a AAA batting order at best in a good pitcher's ballpark down there in San Diego. It's tough not to like this guy. I mean, I do like Strasburg a lot. I've been a big fan. He was one of the 5 guys on my DraftKings most rostered players from last year when I got that email. So, I'm going to have shares of both of these guys on FanDuel. I think I'd rather take the savings with Maeda. But I mean, I don't see any reason why you can't use Strasburg if you can fit in, enough big bats around them.
Yeah, and let's look back. I mean, last year the Padres, second to last in weighted on base. They ranked in the bottom 10 of all these categories. Weighted runs created plus, which of course shows how they basically manufacture runs, isolated power, walk rate, average, on base, hard hit, and line drive. They ranked in the bottom of all of those, and that was with Justin Upton. So we don't expect that to get any better. Okay, so we've got we're pretty much all in agreement, I think. I think those are my cash pitchers, Maeda and Strasburg on 2 starter sites. Do we have any ideas for tournaments of guys that we would pivot to? I'll start with you, Josh. Is it just these 2 guys, or is there anyone else on the slate that you like?
There is one other guy I like starting pitcher, but just before I talk about him, I wanted to touch on Maeda a little bit. For those of you that watch Japan baseball, I know I'm one of the nerds that actually has looked up some of the Japanese pitchers and watched them throw. But they use a smaller baseball, and this is key because when the guys come over, there's a little bit of adjustment period. But for everyone that has played baseball, you know that if you took that ball and made it smaller, it's a lot harder to make that move. And especially with those Japanese baseballs, the seams in their balls are a little bit receded. But the thing about the balls in America, they have a big baseball. It's really light, and those seams are a little bit above the ball. Now, for Japanese pitchers, that's why you see them come over and put so much movement on the baseball. We saw Daisuke strike out a lot of guys. Of course, Tanaka, Yu Darvish, a lot of these guys just become instant strikeout artists. Now, of course, all those guys are not exactly the same, but I've seen Maeda's changeup that Benny was talking about, and this thing moves away from lefties quicker than you would ever think, especially considering it's a changeup, which comes in at just about 80 to 82 miles an hour. So this is a guy that definitely has strikeout upside, and considering the Padres have never seen him, and I think all 3 of us could probably hit better than them right now, they do not stand a chance tonight against Maeda, so I definitely think he's an interesting option. But the guy I did want to talk about in tournaments, if you weren't using a guy like Strasburg or Maeda, I like Michael Pineda tonight in tournaments. Now, the thing with Pineda, it's been basically his whole career. He's either excellent or he's really bad. That basically starts with his fastball command. This guy has excellent stuff. He throws a really heavy ball, which basically means that when hitters get a chance to swing at it and make contact, they really struggle to get it out of the infield or put what's called good wood on it, which means guys get a part of the barrel that makes that ball fly. But considering he faces the Houston Astros, Pineda has an excellent chance to strike out a lot of hitters, and that's why for me he's a GPP play. I can't use him in cash, though, because the Astros definitely have a lot of hitters that can put some runs up on the board quickly.
Yeah, I assume that's which way you were going to go in tournaments with all the strikeout potential for the Astros, but all that power. So it's usually one outcome or the other, very good or very bad against the Astros. But Pineda makes for an interesting case, that's for sure. Does anyone have any other thoughts at starting pitchers? I have one other guy who I think I'm going to have one tournament share of, but let's see if anyone touches on him first.
Yeah, I like Juan Nicasio a little bit actually for the Pirates. I don't know if that was your guy or not, Ricky, but
It
was
was
it?
not, but go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. But yeah, Nicasio is kind of like a reclamation project for the Pirates. Ray Sears, their pitching coach, just has one every year, and this seems to be the guy this year. Crushed it in spring training, 15 innings, 24 strikeouts. He's got an insane strikeout rate. I know the sample was small last year coming out of the bullpen for the Dodgers, but his home runs per fly ball percentage was number one if he qualified with starters, and his strikeout percentage was top 15. And his hard hit percentage was top 3. So this guy has excellent stuff. It's just I don't know if it's going to translate to starting pitching. But he's super cheap, 6,900 on FanDuel. The Cardinals don't have a ton of power. This game is going to be played in cold weather, a little bit of rain coming in the forecast. So I think it's a great spot for Nicasio tonight.
That was not my guy, but yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I was looking at Nicasio. He's one of those guys who Coors Field was kind of, roasting him, and when he goes away from it, I do think he has a much better year this year. But the guy I kind of like is Giovanni Gallardo. Against the Minnesota Twins. I know the ballpark isn't exactly favorable, but this is a guy who's been pretty good against righties in his career. I mean, I'm looking at his career splits, a 1.22 whip against righties versus a 1.43 against lefties, and the Twins lineup today, Dozier righty. Let me just go through the lefties, actually. It's only Mauro Rosario and Eduardo Escobar, the only lefties in the lineup, so not exactly scary. I mean, the Twins were not very good against right-handed pitching last year. Let me get you those numbers. They ranked in the bottom 10 of weighted on base, K rate, runs created, average, and on base. So they were not good, and I like the fact that they were in the bottom 10 of K rate. So, Gallardo, who put together a career low in home run rate last year, which is why he was able to succeed in Texas. I think if he does anywhere near similar this year with the Orioles, if you can succeed in Texas, you can succeed anywhere. And besides Miguel Sano, I'm not exactly scared of the Twins. Does anyone else have anything to say at pitcher, maybe comment on Gallardo?
Yeah, I actually want to talk about Sonny Gray a little bit here as well. I think this Oakland-Chicago White Sox game is going to be one of the lower scoring ones on the day. And I actually like the pitchers on both sides because I'm not a big fan of either one of these offenses. I like Gray a little more than I like Carlos Rodon here, so he's the guy that I'd rather go with. 1.08 whip to both sides of the plate, so neither righties nor lefties really do all that well against them. He actually had a little bit of a higher batting average, 220 average he allowed to right-handers as opposed to a 208 average he allowed to left-handers. You look at the Chicago White Sox team, too. Outside of really Jose Abreu, I don't really see anybody here that profiles to do incredibly well against them. Maybe Adam Eaton can get a couple cheap hits up at the top of that order. It's not really the right splits matchup for a guy like Frazier. From there, the lineup gets kind of ugly. I mean, you got Melky Cabrera down there batting up. There's Alexis Ramirez, I think. I mean, it's horrible, the guys that they have in this lineup when you get to, basically like 6 on down in this Chicago team. So I don't mind using Sonny Gray here, probably only for a tournament. I don't know how he is. He was supposed to start on opening day for Oakland, and then he had that, scare where he was in the hospital with something or else going on. I don't know I think they called it an illness, but don't really have too much more information other than that. But if he's good to go, he's a guy that was very good last year. So I'll probably have some shares of, Sonny Gray in tournaments. I also kind of liked Brandon Finnegan a little bit from Cincinnati, but that game looks like it's going to rain out. So I kind of am off him. But he was a highly touted prospect, 17th overall pick in the draft, left-hander, guy that could really throw. And, you're going to see a whole different Philly lineup if they're in. If you remember last year, Philly ran a big platoon kind of lineup whenever they faced lefties as opposed to righties. So, you'll probably see like Ryan Howard sit. You get a guy like Darren Ruffin there who I know people are going to like, but, no need to get too much into that game because there's a good chance it's going to rain out and we're not going to be able to use these guys anyway.
Yeah, and I know you're a basketball guy just like I am, but being in Chicago is the only reason I know. Alexei Ramirez not on the White Sox anymore. Jimmy Rollins at shortstop. Alexei's on the Padres, so I'm gonna need little updates. I'm gonna screw that up too because I'm a
Yeah.
basketball guy. So when I tell you that Sammy Sosa's still on the Cubs, you guys will have to wake me up for that one too.
Yeah. So
Uh,
they traded one 30-something-year-old, 38-year-old shortstop for another one. I mean, does it really make a difference which one of them is
no,
out there?
no,
Yeah.
it doesn't at all. Just to let you know, moving forward, no Alexei
Mhm.
Ramirez, which bugs me because I own him every year in my AL only league. But let's move on to catcher. We've got I've got two
I hope that
names
was like
down.
an AL Central in the league.
No, it was AL league. I mean, Alexei can go 20-20 if he's lucky. He doesn't do it. It's not pretty, but it happens. But let's go to catcher. I literally have two names. I think you guys are going to touch on them. One of them is Matt Wieters, who I think is really the one that stands out to me. But the other one, actually, let's just start with you, Nick. Who do you like at catcher? I assume one of you guys will say the other name on my list.
Yeah, I'm trotting out Jason Castro right now. I know he's batting ninth for the Astros, but that short porch in right field is definitely tempting. And Michael Pineda's home run rate was super high last year. He was 72nd among 77 qualified pitchers, so he gave up a ton of home runs last year. I know he throws a heavy ball like Josh was saying, but if any lefty gets a hold of it, it could fly over the wall. So I like Jason Castro tonight for a cheap source of power, and he's cheap, like I said.
Benny, who do you like?
Yeah, honestly, I don't like anybody, so I've basically been punting the position. I've been using a guy, Josh Fagley from Oakland Athletics. He's hitting sixth in that order. It's a right-handed bat that hit pretty well last year against left-handed pitching when he was in there. Had a couple of big platoon home runs that actually helped us win some money last season. So he's got a special place in my heart and my wallet right now. So I'm willing to roll him out there again because I think you want to save here. I'm not willing to spend up on any of the guys up top that are expensive.
Yeah, I will say this Oakland lineup I'm looking at right now, actually pretty formidable against lefties. I know they weren't great last year, but the addition of Chris Davis certainly helps. And I mean, we're looking at Billy Burns, Chris Davis, Lowry, Valencia, Butler, Fegley, Canha, so all righties through seven, then Yonder Alonso, and then Semien, who actually was second on the team and waited on base against left-handed pitching last year. I think Rodon might be in for kind of a miserable day. I actually think this athletic stack could be one of the sleeper stacks of the day. I really like them. Collacchi, let's go to you since the other guy I like happens to be on your major league team. Will you please just say the guy's name?
Oh, you're not gonna chooch, are you?
Is he in the lineup? Is it not? Is it not Rupp?
No, it should be Choo. I don't know. I just don't really like that guy. He couldn't catch a beach ball 10 miles an hour, so it has nothing to do with how he can hit. But yeah, basically the guy I like at catcher is also named Josh, just like Benny said, Josh Begley. I think he has a bit better matchup than a lot of people want to think. Last year he had a 341 WOBA against left-handed pitching. He's hitting sixth in that order right now, which is excellent for a catcher that is cheap because a lot of these other guys are hitting seventh, eighth, and ninth. And there's some things that we do know about daily fantasy baseball. The closer you get to the middle of the order, 2, 3, 4, 5, the more chances you have to score fantasy points. And that's the reason why I like Rodon, or I like Fegley against Rodon, because Rodon actually did struggle against righties last year, giving up a 350 WOBA, I believe. So he's definitely an option for me. The other catcher I like is Wilson Ramos, but considering the fact that Fegley's hitting sixth now instead of seventh or eighth, he's definitely going to find his way into my cash lineups.
Wait. So Finnegan, by the way, is a left-hander. So
Yes.
why would we not like Cameron Rupp against him? Who, by the way, is hitting sixth. Of course, other than the rain, which, we're going to assume this is for tournaments only because this game seems like it's 50-50 to get in. But, I mean, a guy almost 400 weighted on base, his slash line last year, 303, 370, 545 against lefties. I mean, if you're going cheaper at the position, why wouldn't you want to use Cameron Rupp?
Oh, I don't hate him. I was just, when you were mentioning the catcher, I thought that
Oh.
you were talking about Carlos Luis.
Yeah.
I do
No.
like Cameron Rupp tonight, definitely. It's a lot of power for considering he's a backup catcher.
Yeah, and I actually like Wieters because I think the Orioles are one of my favorite stacks on the day. I mean, I know he's not fully healthy still, but I still think that at this price, 3,500 on DraftKings, he's viable. Kyle Gibson, not exactly my favorite guy, but options are limited at catcher tonight. For me, again, there were 2 names on my list, which if you've listened to this show at all, that's very limited for any position. So does anyone have anything else to say at catcher, or should we move on? All right, we'll move on. Let's go to first base. Nick, why don't you start us off? Who you got at first?
Yeah, Chris Davis is my guy tonight. And if you use Kenta Maeda on FanDuel, there's no problem fitting Chris Davis and Bryce Harper in tonight. So I'm just locking Chris Davis in against Kyle Gibson for the Twins. He pitches to contact. We know Chris Davis can smash the ball. He was #1 in hard hit percentage against righties last year. So I'm just locking Chris Davis in and moving on from there on FanDuel.
Yeah, I agree with you. Looks like the Dodgers lineup just came in. It's pretty much what we expected. Turner 3, Puig 5. We got Crawford 6. Maybe it's not. We got Utley, Seager, Turner, Gonzalez, Puig, Crawford, Peterson, Ellis, Maeda. So that's the Dodger lineup. Benny, who do you like at first base? Are you on board with Davis, or are you going in a different direction?
Yeah, I actually do like Davis a lot today. If you're playing on DraftKings, he's also eligible as a first baseman or an outfielder, so I've actually been using him in the outfield spot because there's a couple other guys I think are good too. Let me look at my list here. We got Jose Abreu going up against Sonny Gray. Sonny Gray's been a little bit worse to right-handed batters, and Abreu is a guy that does well in same-sided matchups, so righty on righty is actually where he excels. Hit 384 WOBA with a 240 ISO score last year in that situation. And as I said, Gray actually is a little bit worse against right-handed batters. And you have a little bit of data to back up that it's a good spot for him. They played once last year. In 3 at-bats, Abreu took him yard once. I think it was either a grand slam or a 3-run home run. I don't remember off the top of my head. But, I think Abreu is a guy that's going to be sneaky low-owned and does have some upside. You can also look at Adrian Gonzalez going up against Cashner. Cashner really bad against left-handed bats, 293 batting average he gave up to him last year, 175 whip, 14 home runs in 80 innings worth of work. So I think Adrian Gonzalez in a good spot. And then you can also use, there was one other guy I had written down here. Give me a sec. I forgot Darren Ruff too, who we talked about before. If that Philly game does go off, I really like Ruff. He's basically an elite level bat against left-handed pitching. He had a 466 WOBA with a 289 ISO score last year against left-handed pitching. So that's up there in like the Nelson Cruz and Bryce Harper kind of range with his WOBA against the opposite hand of pitching. So he really was that good last year, and his price is pretty cheap on every one of the sites. So if the rain gods hold off the rain in that Cincinnati Philly game, definitely want to have some exposure to Darren Ruff, who's another guy that you could use at either first base or outfield if you're playing on DraftKings.
All right, so we've been talking up Maeda, and here's the Padre lineup against him. Tell me if you guys like this. John Jay, Corey Spangenberg, Matt Kemp, Will Myers, Yangervis Solarte hitting 5th, Derek Norris against the righty hitting 6th, Alexei Ramirez. I don't know what a Jay Blash is, but Blash.
Jabari Blash. Nice. What a name.
So Blash, that sounds like one of those sounds from the old Batman things that would pop up on screen with you when he punches someone, like pow, Blash. But anyways, Cashner hitting 9th. So we've got Norris in his anti-splits. We've got Spangenberg hitting 2nd. This lineup is ugly. I think you have to love Maeda. Does this just make us like him more, or is this kind of what we expected?
This is just kind of what we expected, honestly.
It makes me like him more, but it is kind of what I expected anyway. I mean, we know that San Diego is not good, so this is I'm just looking at it now. This is a hell of a bad lineup that they're rolling out there. So.
This is their A lineup too.
Yeah, any lineup with Solarte 5th, Norris 6th is just, especially against a righty band, it's just brutal. So we mentioned Chris Davis, we mentioned Ruff. Collacchi, have I gotten to you yet? I got sidetracked with this Jabari Blash name.
You were too worried about Superman out of my opinion. So.
Who do you like at first?
I actually like Adrian Gonzalez tonight. And I like him even more because, of course, a lot of people are going to be going after Chris Davis, of course, or Darren Ruff if he does play. But the reason why I like Gonzalez is he basically has similar numbers to those top guys, and he has an even better matchup, I think, because Andrew Kashner is just dreadful against left-handed hitters. Last season, he had a 383 WOBA allowed, and he allowed a 517 slugging percentage, which, just doing quick math, that's over a base for every 2 at-bats against lefties. So a guy like Adrian Gonzalez, who's hitting third in what looks like to be an elite lineup this season with Corey Seager there, Carl Crawford down towards the bottom of the order. They still have Justin Turner, they still have Yasiel Puig. So a guy like Gonzalez in the middle of that order has a ton of chances to score runs and, of course, a ton of chances to drive in runs as well. So I think for me, he's going to slide nicely into my cash lineup, as you are getting him at a bit of a discount for guys like Chris Davis.
Well, in the saga of weird things that my dog's doing in the background, if you hear little noises in the background, he has night terrors, and I'm trying really hard to focus with him doing it. But it's like a person talking in their sleep. So I'm fighting through that. But yes, I agree with you on Adrian Gonzalez. I've got 2 other names, but one of them is kind of first and third now on DraftKings, so we could reserve him for third base. But I want to talk about A-Rod in Yankee Stadium against a righty. I mean, for his career, like we're talking 380 weighted on base against righties, so he gets it done against everyone. So I think A-Rod, while he's not my favorite, I think he's someone I got circled for tournaments because I do think the masses will be on Davis and or Adrian Gonzalez, but also Joey Votto, both first basemen in that game. If that one doesn't get rained out, I think both of them have serious potential. So those are all the names that I have for first base. Does anyone have anything else to say for first, or should we move on through the infield?
Yeah, I have 2 tournament names I like. Pedro Alvarez and Brandon Moss, I think, are just two guys that can easily double dong tonight. So tournaments, I think you need some exposure to a couple of those guys.
Yeah, good call on Alvarez especially. I mean, Moss, we've got the rain now, but I do like him especially because Nicasio struggles against lefties. I look at that 362 weighted on base for career, but I really like that Orioles stack tonight. I think Gibson's getting a little too much credit after a good year, especially 147 whip, 323 weighted on base versus lefties for his career. I like Alvarez a lot. He's kind of in that, if you're using him and you could use both on fantasy draft with Chris Davis, I think that's a pretty solid stack. Let's move to second. We've got some rain candidates once again. So let's go to you, Collacchi. Is there a guy you like for cash? Because a lot of the top options are kind of looking iffy.
I do like Daniel Murphy, and I think he's in one of the games that probably should play. I don't think there's a big issue for rain there. And he's hitting in the middle of that order. I think he's hitting, fifth now for that Washington team, right behind Ryan Zimmerman and Bryce Harper. So he has a chance to drive in runs. He has a decent chance to score runs as well with not your typical 6 and 7 hitters behind him. And, of course, he has that excellent matchup against Bud Norris, who's terrible against righties and also bad against lefties. Not as bad, but still pretty bad. And a guy like Murphy adds some pop to that Washington Nationals team after Bryce Harper. Last season, he had a 347 WOBA and an isolated power rating of almost 200, which is excellent for second base. You're not going to be able to find that power much else. So he's going to slide right into my cash lineups as well. And you have 2 guys in Gonzalez and Daniel Murphy who don't cost you an arm and a leg, but they still have the potential to put up big numbers.
Now, I know some of the guys who taught me the game of daily baseball basically don't believe in hot streaks. But after watching Daniel Murphy in the playoffs last year absolutely crushed my Cubs, he homered in the opener. Do you think that there's something to it that when Murphy gets going, maybe similar to like a Trevor Story, what he's done so far, that Murphy's going to keep raking? Is that factor into it at all, or is it all just numbers based for you?
I think I kind of like to factor that in a little bit. I know it's a bit of anecdotal evidence, which I know we like to avoid, but I think a hot streak in baseball is a little bit different than a hot streak in basketball, which a lot of those data compilations come from. It's basically if a guy makes 3 or 4 shots in a row in basketball, it's a big theory that's been tested that he could make the next one at a higher rate, but it's just not true according to stats. But in baseball, I mean, we all played the game. When you're hot, you're hot. You're seeing that ball a lot better, and I think for me, it doesn't necessarily make you more likely to get a hit. It's just that you're more confident and you're more likely to swing the bat. And in terms of fantasy purposes, if you get more swings in, you have more of a chance to get more fantasy points.
Yeah, Benny, let's go to you with that theory to start off, and then you can name some second basemen because, I know that a lot of people like to go only based on stats, but I'm a big believer in that theory that when a guy gets hot, that he's going to keep riding it out, if only for that confidence factor. Do you agree with that, or are you on the other side of that argument?
No, they actually have changed the thought process on this recently. Somebody published a paper for the sabermetric nerds like myself out there, where they actually wound up proving that hot streaks are a legitimate thing. The problem is they're very tough to predict, but if you're interested in it, if you Google hot streaks from the like the most recent stats and sabermetric conference that they had, there's actually like credible, baseball statistics that have come out right now that says that hot streaks are real. So I'm perfectly a believer in him. I mean, I rode Cesar Hernandez for a month and a half pretty hard, and he won me a lot of money last year. So, there are certain guys that, I think it has a lot to do with what Josh says. When people are confident, they're just going to be better. They're stepping into the plate expecting to get a hit as opposed to worrying about whether or not they're going to make out. And that translates, anything in sports, confidence translates into, better play out on the field. So I definitely believe in it. I definitely think it's real. I do like Murphy a lot in this spot here. Norris last year, 323 to left-handed batters, 183 whip. Gave up one home run every 4 innings to left-handed batters last year. So this is definitely a good spot for any lefty going up against Bud Norris. But he's not the only second baseman. I mean, to mention if that Philly game does play, I still like Cesar Hernandez. And, I'm going to explain this the same way I explained it to people last year. He leads off, and anytime he's on first base, he tries to steal. So if he walks or he gets a hit, he gets you 2 or 3 points on DraftKings and FanDuel now. If he steals second base, that's another 5. That gets you up to 7 or 8 points. And if somebody knocks him in and he scores, that's 9 or 10 points. The guy's only $3,000. 9 or 10 points is 3 times value. If you get 3 times value out of everybody on your roster, you start with $50K, you wind up with 150 points. That's going to cash in all your double ups and probably even make it into the money in most of the tournaments for you. So when you can get Cesar Hernandez at 3K, he's a guy that you want to put into your roster. He's paid off numerous times before, and it's just something that you do. And then the other guy that I like too, Chase Utley has been batting leadoff for the LA Dodgers. They have a good matchup going up against Cashner. We talked about it already. Cashner really bad against left-handed bats. They hit 293 against them last year with a whip of 175. So on top of that order, getting an extra at-bat with a couple big left-handed bats hitting behind them, I think Chase Utley is another guy that's in play here today. So Murphy, Utley, Caesar, basically the 3 guys I'm looking at.
There you go. Benny, the self-described sabermetrics nerd, even though he's dressed like your local neighborhood dope dealer. So he's an interesting paradigm all in one. Nick, let's go to you. Who do you like at second base? Are you on board with Murphy or are you going somewhere else?
Yeah, Murphy's the chalk tonight. I'm going to be using him in cash as well. But if you want to go a different route and fade the chalk, and this is the sport to do it, MLB is definitely the sport to fade the chalk. So if you're doing that route, I like Jed Lowry a little bit on FanDuel, who's second baseman. He's really cheap. He smashes lefties. He had a 388 WOBA against lefties last season. I know he doesn't have much power or anything like that, but he's a guy that'll draw you a walk, and if that A's team's going to hit, he can score some runs. So I like him as a cheap punt, and then I like Colton Wong. I need 6 for the Cardinals against Juan Nicasio. We talked about Nicasio struggling against lefties, and Wong's in a perfect prime power spot. So I like that matchup as well.
Yeah, and I'm going to expand a little on Wong because I think he's my primary tournament option, assuming they get it in. Nicasio splits 362 WOBA against lefties, but it's worse than that. 164 whip versus 134 against righties. 278 average against lefties versus 269 against righties. And then this is what I like, a line drive rate over 21.5% against lefties, and he's almost 18% against righties. So he's given up a lot more hard contact to lefties, which really makes me like Wong. I'm on board with Murphy because the weather there is nice. It's kind of the only one that we can rely on of the good matchups at second base. I think he's the primary option at cash. If it turns out that Hernandez and Wong play and do something, fine, but I think Murphy's a great bet, and he's got some safety. Anyone have anything else to say about the second base position, or should we move to third?
Yeah, you talked about that line drive rate with Nicasio and Wong, but I just wanted to touch on this. If Nicasio qualified for starters last year, which is obviously not a thing, he was a reliever, but if you put his line drive percentage in there, he would have been dead last in qualified starting pitchers in line drive percentage allowed.
Yeah, that to me that's huge, and let's just go to third because that's huge for me. I think Matt Carpenter, Dustin Pedroia calls himself the laser show. Matt Carpenter's right there with him in terms of hard hit percentage and lefties. I love using him against right-handed pitchers. Nick, I assume that Matt Carpenter's got to be up there if they get this game in for you.
Yeah, totally. I'm locking Carpenter into cash. I think we were talking about this on the first show. I think Benny brought it up how Carpenter is just like the most consistent hitter on the in MLB DFS. So I'm locking Carpenter for cash for sure.
Yeah, Benny, you're shaking your head. So let me let you speak instead of speak just with your head movement.
Yeah, I mean, I might not only be the client of using Matt Carpenter, I might also be the president of the fan club at this point. And it's not just that he's so consistent with his hitting and getting on base. The guy scores so many runs because he's on top of that St. Louis order. And he is on base all the time, whether it's through a walk or through a hit. And last year he flashed some power, which is something that we hadn't seen out of him. Josh will tell you guys, I used to do the video every day, and every time they played, a right-handed pitcher, I would mention, hey, don't overthink it. Just, he was cheap, like right around $4,000 on DraftKings. I'm like, just plug the guy in. He's getting you 10 to 12 points every day. He gets, a single and a double or a walk and a double every game. He scores at least a run every game. He'll knock in some RBIs for you. He can steal a base every now and then, although, not as many as you would expect for a leadoff hitter. But again, he's just somebody that's so safe. His bad game, he gets you 8 fantasy points. His good games, he was hitting 2 home runs last year and getting you 25 or 30. And I used to always joke around, and I tell people, he's a guy you play in your cash games. You usually stay away from in tournaments. He doesn't have a ton of upside. And every time I said that, he would go out and hit a home run. So I'm going to say it one more time today. We'll see if it works again. You play him in your cash games, but he's not somebody that I really like in all my tournaments all the time. With that being said, I'll make sure I have him on a tournament roster now because he's going to go yard twice.
Yeah, he had a career year last year in terms of power. I don't know if he repeats that this year, but he definitely is a rock-solid cash option. I'm with you. I love him there. Collacchi, are you on board with that, or do you have another name? Because while I love Matt Carpenter, there's one guy that I think I hold slightly above him, and I'm going to see if you agree with this.
I like Carpenter as well, and just real quick, I can confirm that Benny liked him. The reason why we do our shows with just chest up, because he actually has Matt Carpenter tattoos and pajamas on. Am I right, Benny?
Yeah, I mean, my wife's the only one who actually gets to see it, but yeah, I do have his number tattooed somewhere on my body.
Well, there you go. I mean, I think I might have to join you after what he did last year. I just have to make sure it's okay with the misses. But the guy I think you might be talking about, Ricky, Jed Lowry, is that right?
That is not. I'm talking about a total superstar, so that's the name I like.
Gotcha. So Jabari Blash. All right, I'll let you have it with Jabari Blash. Now, I do like Lowry at third base. He is eligible there, I believe, on DraftKings. He's second base on FanDuel, which is an excellent spot for him, as Nick mentioned. But he's hitting third against Carlos Rodon, who does struggle against righties. Of course, Lowry is a switch hitter, and he has some power, but not over the fence. His power is to the gaps. He's been a doubles hitter basically his entire career. And considering he's hitting third, a double with the guys behind him and in front of him, he has a chance to get a couple runs and a couple RBI. So I definitely think he's worth taking as a substitute if you don't want to use Carpenter or if that game happens to get rained out.
Yeah, there's Carpenter, rock solid cash option. The guy who I think I'm spending up on mostly because your starters aren't going to cost that much and there's really nothing at catcher, so you could punt, is Manny Machado. I've mentioned a few times that I love this Orioles stack, and I'm not scared of Manny Machado against righties whatsoever. I mean, he was a monster. He hits first, so he's going to have a ton of opportunities. I mean, he hits homers. He steals bases. Last year, we're looking at a guy 384 WOBA, his slash line 295, 367, 527 against righties, and Kyle Gibson in a monster hitter's park. I'm just not worried about it whatsoever. I mean, his numbers against righties are fine, but Manny Machado is just a beast to me. I think it's about time he gets going. Even though, the matchup on paper, Carpenter versus a guy against lefties. It seems to be a little bit better. I liked having the superstar bat in Machado. And the guy I like for tournaments is Miguel Sano on the other side of that. We mentioned Gallardo's numbers. Gallardo's numbers are decent against righties, but Sano absolutely smoked them last year. He was one of those guys with the reverse splits. Josh, why don't you talk about that? You love the guys with the reverse splits. So why don't you talk about Sano a little and why he might be viable against a righty?
Well, first things first, with reverse splits in tournaments, a lot of people that do research will just naturally think of lefty-righty or righty-lefty and think that's an excellent matchup. So they could look at Sano and see righty-righty, they might stay away from it. But like you said, Sano is just ridiculous against right-handed hitting, and it's kind of like Cespedes, and it's weird because if you think about their swings, they're awfully similar, aren't they? They both have righty uppercut swings, and I know Sano is more of a balanced approach, but he swings for the fences as well. So for a guy and a righty with a reverse split like that, it gives him a chance to get you a home run or two at less ownership as compared to some other guys, simply because he isn't getting that quote-unquote elite lefty-righty matchup.
Yeah, and we're running short on time, so does anyone have any more quick tidbits at third that they want to mention?
Yeah, I like Luis Valbuena and who was the other one? Oh, Danny Valencia for tournaments.
Yeah, I've got Valencia in the outfield. I guess he's third on FanDuel, but yeah, I agree with you. We touched on the A's a little, how we like them against lefties, and I think he's got a little bit of upside because Rodon can be wild at times. So he's probably getting on base at some point as well. Anything else to say about them, Nick?
Valbuena's WOBA last year against righty was 348. His ISO was 234, and weighted runs created plus was 121. So, I mean, he's going to strike out. You know that, but if he gets a hold of one, it can go out. And Pineda's home run rate was super high last year.
Yeah, Valbuena, kind of your Adam Dunn type, where it's either all or nothing. So he's definitely a prime tournament option a lot of nights, especially against righties. Let's go to shortstop. For me, Corey Seager's the guy, but let's go to anyone else who's got some other ideas. Benny, are you on Seager or are you on someone else?
Yeah, I mean, I like Seager. For tournaments, I'm also going to have some shares of Carlos Correa. I mean, this guy is one of the best young shortstops, one of the best shortstops, period. I'll take the young out of it. Just one of the best hitting shortstops, period, in the major leagues. Pineda, you never know what you're going to get with him. As somebody said earlier in the show, he's had his ups and he had his downs. A couple years ago, he was a guy that gave up a 200 batting average and a whip below 1 to both lefties and righties. Last year, he was a guy that gave up like a 270 batting average to both lefties and righties with a whip that was somewhere around like 1.4. So, if that's the situation, if he has one of his bad games where his slider's not working for him and he's not locating his fastball in the right way, Correa's got the kind of power. We saw it the other day against a right-handed pitcher where he took him out of Yankee Stadium. I think that's something that he could do again. So Seager is the chalk. He's definitely the guy that's in the right spot. I mean, he came up last year, had like a 430 WOBA, 250 ISO score. You don't find that a lot from shortstops. So far early this season, he's done nothing but hit the ball. He's kind of been overshadowed because you got Trevor Story with his 4 home runs already, and, Gene Segura had a couple big games, but, Seager's a huge prospect. This guy's an absolute stud. He's batting second in the order, good matchup against Cashner, who struggles with lefties. I mean, he's easily the chalk for your cash game. If you want to do something different in a tournament, you got Jed Lowry is shortstop eligible on DraftKings. You can use him as well. And then you also have, Correa, who's only a couple $100 more than Seager. And if everybody's going to be drawn to Seager, I think Correa makes some sense in tournaments.
Yeah, Nick, you got any thoughts at the position other than Seager?
No, we're running short on time, so I'll just go with Seager and move on.
Collacchi?
I thought you were going to have a Bob Seager, Corey Seager pump this morning, Ricky. I really thought that was going to happen, but unfortunately it wasn't to be seen. The only other guy I like at shortstop is Marcus Semien, but he's hitting 9th, and we know that guys that hit after 6th in the order really drop in fantasy points, so I don't think he's necessarily an option now because he's hitting 9th. So for me, it's Seager all the way.
It's funny you just made fun of me for a pronunciation thing, and then you called him Semien. It's Semien, and we're not even going to make the jokes about what you were saying. But also, the guy I've really had issues with today is Maeda. I keep calling him Maeda because, the whole being from Chicago thing without the pronunciation. So that's the guy I've had issues with. No Bob Seger. I know the difference. Big Bob Seger fan. But let's move on to outfield because I think we need to spend the full final 11 minutes on it. There are a lot of options. I think my main cash target may surprise you guys. Beyond Bryce Harper on the Nationals, I really like Michael Taylor. This is a guy who I think could go 20-20 this year, and we've touched on the lefties against Bud Norris, and he's certainly one of them. He's hitting first. He's got Bryce Harper hitting behind him, so he's got run scored potential. The weather's fine, so I think you're using Bryce Harper, but I think I almost called him Maeda. I think Michael Taylor is a guy you're pairing with him. You could pair Maeda with him too if you want, but Taylor and Harper and cash I think is a pretty good strategy tonight. Nick, who do you like in the outfield?
Yeah, Josh, or one of you guys touched on this guy earlier, but Miguel Sano is an outfielder on FanDuel. I love that spot for him. I don't know if I'm going to touch too heavily on him, but Gallardo is a pitch-to-contact guy. He doesn't strike anyone out anymore. He gives up a lot of line drives, and his swing and miss rate is like super low. So I just love this spot for Sano in the outfield, and I like Colby Rasmus a lot too. I know I'm touching all these lefty Astros bats, but just that short porch in Yankee Stadium against a home run pitcher like Pineda, I just love this spot for Rasmus as well.
There you go. Astros are an interesting stack. I agree with it because the same reason that Pineda is a good tournament option is the same reason that the Astros are a good tournament option. They're hit or miss. Either Pineda's going to hit or the Astros bats are going to hit. So something's got to give. Benny, let's go to you. Who do you like in the outfield?
Yeah, I agree with you on Harper and Taylor. Just to give you a quick update on Taylor and the reason why Ricky and I like him so much. Ben Revere was the leadoff hitter for the Nationals. He got hurt and he's going to be out today. So Taylor's probably going to be leading off at the top of that order. His price is pretty cheap on most of the sites.
He is. It's confirmed.
Okay, yeah, so he's going to be leading off, and his price is still pretty cheap on most of the sites because he was basically a backup outfielder. But this is a guy that was pushing for a starting spot. He is that good. He's not just a scrub that they're throwing out there because somebody got hurt and they need him. He's not every bit as good as Ben Revere. Ben Revere has a little bit more of a track record. But I agree with Ricky. I mean, this guy has a little bit of pop, definitely has a lot of speed. He's going to be hitting on the top of an order that's got a bunch of bats behind him that can drive him in. So I really like Taylor today as well. And then depending on where you're playing, there's a lot of guys who we already mentioned at other positions who, depending on what site you're playing on, are listed as outfielders. Nick just mentioned that Miguel Sano is a guy who, is outfield eligible on FanDuel. You look on DraftKings, guys that we talked about like Chris Davis, Darren Ruff, Danny Valencia, all these guys are listed as outfielders. Brandon Moss, another one, listed as outfielders. So there's not a ton of outfield guys that I really like. I will have some exposure to, a guy like Yasiel Puig, but it's going to be mostly on my my Los Angeles Dodgers stacks. But I really like Harper. I like Taylor. And then, depending on what site you're playing on, on FanDuel, I actually have Sano as my third outfielder in there. Over on DraftKings, I have shares of guys like Valencia and Darren Ruff. And, those are probably going to be the guys that I roll with as my third outfielder. Or even Chris Davis, if you didn't use him at first base. These are the guys that I think you should probably be rolling out there. If you could fit Davis and Harper and Taylor into your lineup at the outfield spot tonight, I think you're going to be pretty happy with the returns that you get there.
Collacchi, do you have any other names? We've gone through a bunch already, but there certainly are some more out there, and I think we missed an important Oakland A's outfielder, for me at least.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on, I do like a lot of the same guys we talked about have listed here. Bryce Harper, Randall Grichuk actually has a 287 isolated power
He's
rating.
out of the lineup. He's not in the lineup. He's not in the lineup. I like him too.
Scratch him off. Definitely scratch him off. But I wanted to mention a quick teaching point about these outfielders. Benny mentioned, Ricky mentioned, of course, there are a lot of guys in the outfield that are also eligible at first base. Now, guys at first base naturally usually have more fantasy points because they're basically power hitters. That's usually what happens at first. So if you get these guys eligible in the outfield, there's a potential you can have 4 first basemen in your lineup, which I cannot say that's a bad thing for sure. Of course, you have Chris Davis eligible in the outfield, Trumbo, guys like Adrian Gonzalez you can put at first, and still have other guys that are eligible at first that you can put them in the outfield and have a lot of potential for a lot of home runs. So I do think those are some guys to consider. And just to add 2 tournament plays in, I do like Carl Crawford and Jock Peterson, although they are lower in the lineup for the Dodgers. They are left-handed with that excellent matchup against Andrew Kashner.
Yeah, and the guy I was alluding to that I think is certainly viable for cash is Billy Burns. He's a guy who steals a ton of bases, and he hit over 300 against lefties last year. 316 with a 356 on base percentage, and again against Carlos Rodon, a guy who's pretty wild and is known for walks. I like looking for those guys who can get on base. And then Burns is one of those guys who, obviously you'd prefer he have a righty up if he's going to steal a base, but I don't think Deoner Navarro's the world's greatest catcher in terms of throwing guys out, and Burns will steal against anyone. So if Rodon's not careful, he certainly could. And we already mentioned that we like the A's as a whole for a lineup, so I think Burns could score some runs. I think he's a solid cash option. I think he's on base at least once or twice. The only other name that I had is Gregory Polanco, who I think is a stud versus right-handed pitching. I think a lot of people are going to go to McCutchen, but for the price difference, I think I'm taking Polanco. There's a guy who steals a ton of bases. He's still got some power, and Mike Leake is a guy who struggles against lefties. It's 23 percentage points higher, his weighted on base against lefties than righties, so that's a good spot for him. Does anyone have any more tournament options for outfield? All right, let's go then to let's do a bold predictions then, because that's how we like to end our shows here. It's not just an NBA thing. Let's start with you, Collacchi. You got any bold predictions for us?
Yeah, I have two. I think Kenta Maeda strikes out 10 guys tonight, 4 of them on changeups. So obviously, you'll have to watch the game to confirm that. But my other bold call, I think Adrian Gonzalez finishes tonight as the highest scoring player on DraftKings and in terms of hitting. Of course, he might not be able to get up there with the pitchers, but the highest scoring hitter tonight on DraftKings, Adrian Gonzalez at first base.
Very nicely done. Adrian Gonzalez, I love that guy, so I can't argue there. Benny, what do you got for us? Anything more bold than Adrian Gonzalez?
Yeah, after seeing the obnoxious amount of right-handed bats the Oakland Athletics are rolling against Carlos Rodon tonight, I'm going to say the Oakland A's stack with Sonny Gray on top for the win.
There you go. We are on board with Oakland. Benny and I are the same page there. Nick, what do you got for us in terms of boldness?
Yeah, I'll go with a similar strategy and just go with that Astro stack is on top tonight. I love that stack.
Very interesting. I'm going to go bold with Steven Strasburg. This Atlanta team, very tough to strike out, but I loved what I saw for him in preseason. I'm going to go Steven Strasburg. Let's go 8 shutout with 14 strikeouts against this Atlanta team. I really think he is the play at pitcher tonight. Even though Atlanta's known for not striking out, I've got faith in my boy Strasburg. Cost me a lot of money last year, but I think this is his year. Let's just review our favorite plays. We got a few minutes left. Let's go to you, Benny. If you got 3 guys that you could roll in, every lineup tonight, who's your base?
Bryce Harper, Chris Davis, and the third one would be, who do I like most? Well, if the game plays, Matt Carpenter.
There you go. Nick, what about you? 3 guys that you are going to base around tonight.
Yeah, 2 are the same with Benny, and it's Chris Davis, Bryson Kenta Maeda on FanDuel.
Collacchi?
I have 3 guys, but Ricky, didn't you just say you have anything more bold than Adrian Gonzalez? And then you said Steven Strasburg's going to pitch well against the Atlanta Braves?
Hey, but the Braves don't strike out, so predicting 14 strikeouts against them is, something that never happens against them.
I'm predicting 14 strikeouts in the first inning for Strasburg. But the 3 guys I want to target tonight will be on all my lineups: Adrian Gonzalez, Daniel Murphy, and Kenta Maeda.
All right, how's this for bold? I'm going Michael Taylor, 25 DraftKings points tonight. How's that?
That's a little bit better. There
we go. I'm definitely on board with them. The guys I'm building around tonight, I really am a big believer in Michael Taylor tonight. So I'm going all Nationals tonight. Taylor, Harper, Strasburg, I think they get a big win. I'm way on board with them. I'll probably be mixing them in with some stacks of some other teams, but those are guys that I'm a firm believer in. We got 2 minutes left, gentlemen. Any other thoughts? Do we have any weather updates? Maybe that would be kind of huge.
The only thing I had is, don't you think you have to make one lineup with Jabari Blash and Mr. What's his first name? Jeremy Hazelbaker? I gotta have a Blash Hazelbaker stack, right? What's that sound like?
Yeah, there are some pretty interesting names in the lineup tonight. That's for sure. Who was the other guy I was looking at? Who's the guy hitting 9th for the Orioles? I was looking at their stack. He's got a nice, interesting name too.
What was it? Let's
Well,
see. Joey Rickard? Is that who you're talking
Rickard,
about?
yeah, it wasn't quite the same ballpark as the other ones, but yeah, there was a bunch of guys that I was looking at. It's just, where did these guys come from?
Yeah, last second update just before we get off the air here. Danielle, our weather girl at Weather DFS, just tweeted out the Atlanta game still a few hours away until first pitch, but showers and storms should hold off until after the game, so that's good. And then she also said that the Cincinnati game may try and play some innings, but there's a lot of rain on the way. Very good chance that it's going to get stopped, and they might not have a window to play more of it. So even if they start this game, there's still a chance that it could get rained out in the third or fourth inning and all those stats get erased. So even if they do decide to play it, just be really wary because it looks really bad in Cincinnati tonight.
All right, let's go with one final question then, just for my own roster construction. I'll ask all three of you guys. There's only one guy on Fantasy Draft for the price that I can afford with the other guys that I want, and that's Adonis Garcia at 5,200, who's hitting in the top 6 of the lineup. But he's going against Strasburg. Would you rather use a guy hitting, maybe 8th or 9th in a lineup, or would you go Adonis Garcia against your pitcher to fill out your cash lineup? Benny, what do you think?
I would take the guy that's 8 or 9th to fill out my cash lineup, but if I wasn't using Strasburg, Adonis Garcia is actually not a horrible player. He's got a little bit of pop, and he's actually batting cleanup. So he's behind Freddie Freeman. Yeah, he's behind Freddie Freeman. He's in a good spot in the order. I never play a guy unless he has speed against my starting pitcher in cash, but for a tournament, if somebody wanted to throw Garcia in there, you're getting a guy that does have home run upside and RBI upside that's going to be less than 2% because everyone's rolling Strasburg tonight.
This is brutal. The only two guys in the lineup below him are Hazel Baker, or whatever his name is, and Rickard. So I think I got to stick with Garcia in the cash lineup against my pitcher. I don't like to do it, but it's happening tonight. That's all for us. We're a minute over. Don't forget to check out the free roll, whatever the hell it is. None of us know. Coming up.
It is on Friday, that's for sure.
It's Friday, yeah, it's Friday.
There is a free roll then. It's free and you can make some money, so just prepare for that. Check out the MLB tools, NBA tools. But good luck tonight. We are out.